We're getting right into it. I'm covering a lot of stuff in the beginning just so you guys have an understanding of literally the thing that we do the most throughout the day. So like you read in the little descriptor, we breathe about 22 to 25,000 times a day. It is a movement, right? And it is a gaseous exchange or physiological response. So breathing is different than respiration, and they get interchanged all the time, right? Respiration is that exchange of O2 and CO2. Breathing is this, right? Mechanics versus gas exchange. Now, the reason I call this high performance breathing is we're going to take both of those and work on both, right? So if you go to somebody like a respiratory therapist, we're usually working on gas exchange. If we take a medication, right? If we're taking Singulair, we're taking albuterol, we're working on gas exchange. It has nothing to do with mechanics. But to me, it's like a car. You can have the best, like everything's working on the car, right? You got air in the tires, the axles are straight, everything's good. You have no gas, it's not gonna matter, right? So you have to have the mechanics and the gas exchange there. And that's why I call it high performance breathing, because you put those two together, it goes beyond getting over breathing issues, taking it into exercise. And I've talked to some of you guys that it's like, man, I feel like I'm in pretty good shape and I feel like my aerobic capacity stinks. Or some of you may be dealing with things like sleep apnea or whatever it is. And we're gonna go on both ends of the spectrum tonight. So the first thing to look at is kind of some interesting stats here. So 22 million Americans suffer from sleep apnea. It's a lot for people. The crazy thing is, they think there's another 80% of people that are undiagnosed. That's a ton of people that are, so we have to define sleep apnea now, right? You all know what that term is, but sleep apnea is literally just micro wake cycles throughout the night. So for whatever reason, it could be micro, it could be macro, that you're waking all the way up. Micro just means that you're not realizing you're waking up. So sometimes we're waking up anywhere from 100 to 300 times a night. So people wonder why when they get a CPAP mask on, that all of a sudden they feel better. CPAP has affected gas exchange, right? Does everybody know what a CPAP machine is? It's basically forcing oxygen into your system. So even though you're still breathing very poorly, you're getting more O2. So we haven't actually fixed anything. We're just giving you more of what you needed, right? To fix it, we'd have to keep the CPAP machine on all day because you still have a breathing issue. So this is a big deal. And when we see stuff like this, it's almost like the obesity epidemic, right? You gotta ask, like, what's going on? Like, why is it like this, right? And that's what we're gonna start posing those questions and go through. Asthma. 1 in 12 people have asthma. This is just America. Should have capitalized Americans. 25 million Americans, 56 billion spent every year. Ton of money. But why do so many people have asthma? Like, is this genetic? Is this truly a disease? Or is asthma an issue of mechanics? Right? It's the same thing like the sitting is the new smoking. Well, is it really? Right? Like, I don't think it is. I think sedentary lifestyle will kill anybody. You could stand all day and probably be just as worse off. You gotta move. You have to breathe to live, so we better be able to figure out how to breathe a little bit better. One thing we don't think about necessarily associated with breathing is, you may, if you've been in our clinic, is pain. But I can tell you, and as we go through this, we'll explain this a little better, but pain is absolutely associated with how you breathe. 80% of Americans suffer from low back pain. A lot of people. 100 billion spent on this annually. 100 million Americans suffer from chronic pain. So all that means is you have basically non-specific undiagnosed pain. So we have pain in our elbow, but we can't say it's tennis elbow. Golfers though, just like, because we've done all the treatments and now you got pain. And you may say, well, what's it got to do with breathing? Like, we'll explain all that. But this is a big deal. 600 billion spent on chronic pain. And what do you think most of that's spent on? Pills. What are pills doing? It's just like shoving more oxygen down there. Ain't fixing nothing. Okay. So where do we go wrong? Well, most of us started here. And when I say started here, little babies, and if you've been in our clinic, you know this, right? We're talking about belly breathing like babies. This baby doesn't have its mouth open. It's breathing through its nose. It's doing a lot of things right. And then all of a sudden, came along this freaking monkey. So what is this about? So there's a lot of theories about why breathing goes awry, right? If there's so many problems, asthma, sleep apnea, dysfunction, leads to pain, there's got to be something going on. Well, this little image is basically explaining how things that we think This is a theory called mirror neurons. It's proven that there are things that are mirror neurons. We don't know exactly how they work. Mirror neurons are what we would be trying to work on when we're doing stroke therapy, right? Somebody's had a stroke and we're doing rehab using a mirror where we can see the good side of our body doing something. Behind the mirror, we're trying to make the bad side do it. And all of a sudden it works, right? Because your brain is a powerful thing. Well, way back in the day, we're setting beliefs aside here. Let's say that we did evolve from something, okay? If we evolved, we needed to evolve to live in a social world, right? I can look at you guys and see you nodding and being like, this guy's an idiot, or this guy knows what he's talking about, right? Picking up on social cues has a lot to do with this mirror neuron. What also had a lot to do with it is learning like crucial, basically very high level like skills, right? So using tools. So if I was a kid and I could watch my mom do something with a tool, she didn't have to explain it to me. So we think that mirror neurons were the predecessor actually to language, right? That we didn't actually communicate verbally, that we learned through doing. Well, the scary thing is, if I can learn how to maybe weave a basket, I can learn how to fish through the activation of these mirror neurons, better believe I can learn how to breathe. So if you breathe poorly, there's a good chance your daughters may breathe poorly. It has nothing to do with their own dysfunction. It started with you, but it started with your mom, right? So you can kind of see this, and that's just one part of it. So this little chart, I like this because this is a little older. Here. So on my left side here, your left too, it says the correct pose for inhalation, front view. This is obviously, this doesn't have a circo, but this looks like around the early 1900s. But this is a huge, what we would call secondary breath, right? And you can literally see some of his intercostals here. You can see in between his ribs. So he went through a secondary breath here. He's used his neck muscles, right? His scalenes, his SCMs, his upper traps, intercostals to breathe, which secondary respiration should be reserved for exercise, right? Have you ever gone run? Right? Or fight or flight, right? If somebody scares you, right? Cool little tidbit. We know that we learn better on an inhale than an exhale. You remember things. You want to know why, probably? You want to know who scared you, so if it happens again, right, we know how to run, right? If a lion scared you, you want to know, and next time I'm out of there, okay? But this is what we're calling correct. Now, this is very outdated. We know this now. But this is secondary respiration. And then this is showing actually an exhale position. I don't know why this says correct exhale position. If you ever had to breathe like, can you imagine breathing like this 22,000 times a day? But that's an exaggeration of what we do on a small level. Like literally, I can't tell you how many people I see, especially when you correlate it to the area that you think would be bugged, people with neck pain, right? So if we get in the seated posture, maybe it's not the seated posture. Maybe it's the fact that we're seated affects our breathing, which then affects our neck from the poor breathing, and then we wonder why we have all these neck symptoms from text neck or poor posture at the desk. We don't know 100%, but we're getting a lot better guesses. So talk a little more about the secondary versus primary. So why is it called secondary, right? It's secondary to what we should be doing most of the day. You will secondary breathe when you need more O2. We think that it's probably evolution or efficiency. If I sit in a chair all day, it is far more efficient to breathe through my chest than my diaphragm, especially if I'm a little hunched over a keyboard, right? This becomes more efficient because I'm actually like basically compressing this, right? If I was standing up, it would make more sense to use these muscles that we'll explain later as postural muscles that it should be, but our body is made to be more efficient. All right, Ken's been running for a long time. His gait has gotten very efficient, but what do we also find in runners as we get older? Stride length decreases and stride rate decreases because we're becoming more efficient. Right? We get a little tighter, all this stuff has to happen for a reason. You can hang on to your stride rate and stride length, you're gonna look really weird as you get older. Your body's different. It's different than it was when it was 30. Right? Restrictive clothing. I know it sounds really silly, but there's a lot of research looking at belts, dress clothes, especially think of women that are wearing like skirts and things like this, especially in the workplace, like business. Restrictive clothing, and then on the other end of that would be vanity. This is probably a big one. I blame this on Arnold Schwarzenegger and his sucked in pose here, but I was talking to someone about this the other night. I would say most women have this problem, a lot of guys do too, but we tend to suck in. And we also get coached on this, right? A lot of women think that this is actually creating a stability or a position of stability for your spine. Well, it's doing the exact opposite. It's using muscles that are meant to move just like your bicep, turn off, turn on, as postural muscles, right? These muscles, your abs, your obliques, your lumbar erectors, are not postural muscles. Postural muscles are closer to your spine, but it's also based on pressure in here. Does that make sense? So if we suck in all day, now we are forced to breathe up here. You cannot breathe down here. So this is probably one of the bigger ones. Now, you take all of these, right? I wear restricted clothing. I'm getting efficient at breathing like this. Vanity comes into play, and then you get that, what we already talked about, this kind of monkey see, monkey do, learned behavior. We think that kids around 6 to 8 years old, this is when this mirror neuron kicks in really heavy, right? Because that's when kids are starting to get more into the cortical processing rather than just like exploring things and kind of, you know, flailing around like little weirdos, right? But when they do this stuff, they're looking at you. So what do they see? They see us sighing, they see, right? They see us yawn. They pick up, like kids are picking up on subtleties. Like, Matt, how many of you have kids? How many of you have been surprised by something that they've said that you didn't know that you said, something you did that you didn't know that they saw? Like they don't even know they're picking up on it. This is a subconscious process. Very powerful, right? Otherwise, we would not be learning at the rate that we're learning right now, okay? So let's talk a little bit more about primary respiration. So this is just a good chart, and I'll explain some anatomy as we go through this. But this little thin strip is a muscle called your diaphragm, right? We don't have a big blue balloon in our abdomen. This is just a chart, right? But we do have this big triangle down here with a little bit of muscle down here. This is your pelvic floor, right? This triangle here. Everything in the middle would be your vital organs. Now, you can see all the arrows pushing in. You can see the arrows pushing out here. What this chart is depicting is how we create what's called intra-abdominal pressure through our midsection. So as we breathe in, and hopefully it's a belly breath, the diaphragm moves down. It opposes those muscles in the pelvic floor. It also opposes the muscles in the front, right? It opposes the muscles in the back and the side. So it's like squeezing a cylinder, squeezing a syringe, you increase pressure, and that's called Boyle's law. So as volume decreases, pressure increases. Well, that's what creates stability, guys. So everybody that thinks when we cinch down that weight belt when we're going to squat 400 that we're like cinching down stuff to hang on to it, it's the exact opposite. You're actually cinching down the belt so you give your brain more feedback to push out against the belt and create even more pressure. There's never been, I think his name is Mariusz Pudzianowski, may have been the guy that was closest to it, strong man, if you remember him from Poland. He had a six-pack, like a legit six-pack. But it was still that kind of like curved six-pack. Every other powerlifter you've ever seen has a big old keg, right? It's because over time they've learned to create what's called a Valsalva maneuver and create these super breaths and create a ton of pressure. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to deadlift 800, 900, 1,000 pounds. Wouldn't happen, right? Your muscles would not withstand that. Okay, so it's about pressure. Diaphragmatic breathing is a big deal for a shift from sympathetic to parasympathetic. So remember I talked about the lion. The lion in your face is a fight or flight, sympathetic, right? Parasympathetic is what we call rest and digest. There's a couple other names that I won't mention, but rest and digest, right? Taking it easy, things like that. Well, when you breathe down here, everybody knows if you're stressing out, what's everybody say? Take a deep breath. Well, what they should say is take a belly breath, right? Because if you take a big breath, we further perpetuate this problem. And that's another thing, is when we are living in this sympathetic state, which this is another popular thing to talk about, is that we're overstressed, overworked, we don't have enough time. But a big part of that is that when we live in this sympathetic state and we put a bunch of things like coffee into the system and we breathe like this, we're always like working at this high sympathetic level, which then leads back into the things we already mentioned, like pain, asthma, sleep apnea. Does that make sense? Like literally, if you were being chased all day, you think you would be operating at a very high level like in the rest of your life? No. But that's what we don't think about this because we live very comfortable lives. But we live comfortable lives that are almost like shrouded in this like miniature like stressor. It's like we're being chased by our own lions every day. And I know that sounds crazy, but like
it doesn't.
yeah. But think about how much what I could have put in here too was anxiety. Could have put in depression. I could have put in, I mean, this, and I'm not saying that breathing is the thing. It's a big thing, right? Just like movement, it's just like diet, it's just like meaningful relationships, right? Like purpose. These are big things, but I mean, if you've been in our clinic, what's the first thing we usually ask you about or work on is usually breathing. Right? I don't care if it's you got toe pain or neck pain or back pain. Organ pumping, lymphatic drainage. So you can imagine, you have a big plunger, so your diaphragm moves down and pushes against here, and you got all these organs that are filled with fluids, right? Your liver's pumping blood back up to your heart, your pancreas is pumping red blood cells out. As we pump, as we breathe, we make these organs work better. We also move lymph. So lymph is just fluid that moves waste and metabolites throughout your body back to your heart so you can recycle it and turn it back into blood. So in order to move lymph anywhere in your body, you have to have movement. Right? So if I go out and I cycle a lot, I'm going to have metabolites, right? Everybody, the most common one that people know is like lactate, right? Or lactic acid. So to be able to move that out of the system, especially when I'm post-exercise, because what are you doing when you're exercising? Moving, right? So we're still moving fluid. But when we lay down on the couch, let's say I go run a 50-mile race, and I lay down on the couch, especially if my feet are at the level of my heart, there's a good chance I'm going to have what's called venous stasis. So I'm not moving stuff anymore. So why do you think things like the Normatec have become popular and foam rollers, right? Because we need to move. We still need to move our muscles, so if I pump my calf, lymph moves up towards my big lymphatic channels here. But what's in between here and my heart? Right? There's not a whole lot of big muscles in the middle to move around and do this stuff, right? Unless you're doing like, remember the old school calisthenics? Like they're just doing this stuff. Like you can just breathe and I do a lot of that. And then better perfusion. So without getting too sciencey, as you breathe down here, you incorporate more of the lower lobes of your lungs. So if you guys remember from bio class or anatomy, you got 3 lobes, upper, middle, lower. Lower is obviously the biggest. This is like a little cone. Gravity pulls liquid down, so you have more blood and more contact with more tissue down here. So as you breathe down, you draw more down into the lower lobe. So you have more lung tissue and contact with more blood, so you're going to get more O2, CO2 gas exchange. That makes sense? So if I'm in this state, from the get-go of running, like the first mile, I'm getting worse perfusion. I'm setting myself up to release more cortisol, norepinephrine, epinephrine. Can you imagine where the crash is coming from? Right? So maybe, and imagine on a race day. Like I know you can attest this, you're amped up already. Right? So the last thing we want to do is like perpetuate it in the first half mile. And, like we want to depress the system, right? Get in the zone, whatever you want to call it. And then you got the mouth breathing. Watch this guy right in his mouth until over. So mouth breathing is a big deal. Big deal. Sloan has me Netflixing my butt off right now watching Friday Night Lights. It's driving me nuts. Everybody's a mouth breather in there. I don't know why. So why is mouth, I don't know if you guys ever catch yourself doing this. Some of you probably do this at night, which we'll talk about. Mouth breathing has become literally an epidemic among kids. And we think a lot of that is developmentally, and we'll talk about that. So mouth breathing. Higher occurrence of sleep apnea and snoring. You've never met somebody who snores who is not breathing through their mouth while they're snoring. You don't do it any other way. The funny thing is when we mimic people snoring, what do? It's not how it happens, right? What do people do when they snore? Like when I used to go on family vacation with my dad and stay in a hotel, I would pull my hair, I'd be screaming. I mean, like the walls are shaking, but every once in a while it was this. You think he's dead, and he comes back to life. That's sleep apnea. What do? Microcycle, right? Every once in a while it's macro, and you, right? He literally woke himself up because your brain thinks you're shutting your glottis, right? Your throat is closing, right? It is not normal. But what we're doing is, if let's say I don't have anything wrong with my nose, I don't have any obstructions, why would I be breathing through my mouth at night? Because I'm doing it during the day. Right? Just one's feeding the other, and you snowball until that's how you do it, right? Post-exercise asthma symptoms. A lot of people get this in the cold, right? And I'm not saying that breathing through your mouth is not normal in your exercise. Absolutely is. But you should not have asthma symptoms in this much humidity after a hard bout of exercise. I can almost guarantee anybody that's ever done a hard bout of endurance work or like high intensity, if you've ever had that little like, almost like a catch or a cough after you work really hard, like you're coughing or something, that's what that is. But what happens is, let's say that happens 4 or 5 times in a row, or I just started working out again and I get that every time. What do you think you're going to do? You're going to go to the doctor. You're going to say, man, every time I work out, I feel like it's hard to breathe. How long does it last? 20 minutes, and that's gone. Maybe an hour if I work really hard. You got exercise-induced asthma. What do you get? Single air, albuterol. What do those do? They basically open the airway synthetically, right? You don't have to do it. So what do you get to keep doing? Shove an O2 down your throat, you get to falsely open your airways, which you should be doing. We'll explain how that happens through your nose. We never fix the problem. Shove more stuff in your mouth. Lack of soft palate jaw formation in children. I mean, this sounds crazy, but this is the truth. Like, a bunch of research again. If I'm not breathing through my nose, I got my mouth open, right? If I don't have my tongue in contact with the roof of my mouth, I don't form my soft palate correctly. I have a more flattened soft palate or roof of your mouth, which is the bottom of your nasal cavity, which can cause problems later. You're also going to see cleft chins, basically a depressed chin. You're going to see lack of jaw formation, lack of angulation of the jaw, depressed cheekbones. I'm not saying this to be mean, but you'll see this in a lot of kids these days, right? Especially the cleft chin and what ends up happening. We're in braces a lot longer. We're in more aggressive braces. We're seeing jaw surgery in kids that's like off the charts for occurrence. We used to see them every once in a while because you will have congenital anomalies in your bony anatomy. But it shouldn't be the norm, and it's becoming the norm. So all I'm saying is if you don't want your kids to look like this, right? Funny thing is, this guy has his mouth sewed shut. He's still look like this. So
I noticed everybody's breathing with their mouth closed right now.
yeah, same thing happens when we talk about posture, right?
Yeah.
So if your mouth breathing, this is the big crux. So when I think something's super important, we're going to hammer it. This is one of the 3 points tonight that I need you guys to get. If you're mouth breathing, I call it the snowball effect, right? It creates chronic hyperventilation. We think of hyperventilation is also too much. Right? Too much, too often. Results in lower tolerance to CO2. I'm going to bullet these, we're talking about them later. Just realize this is the thing, right? We're breathing too much, too often. We're becoming less efficient. If I'm a runner, I want efficiency. If I'm a car, I want gas efficiency, right? Like it's all about efficiency when it comes to any physiological process. What did we say earlier? The reason you may be breathing like this is mechanical efficiency, right? This perpetuates, this is a snowball. So overbreathing problem, keeping your breath rate high to continuously expel CO2. We'll explain this more later. But if I constantly think I need more air because I can't utilize the O2 I have in my system, what do I keep doing? Looking for it. But I'm not fixing the problem, right? And this is what we're seeing is that people don't look at breathing like we do nutrition, right? We know we take calories in, we burn calories. You take O2 in and you expel CO2 and we think CO2 is a waste gas and that's where it's got us in problem. We're in some problems and we talk about O2 sat, if you've ever seen these little like pulse oximeters, right? You go to the doctor's office or you've been in the hospital, you got one of these on your finger the entire time. We'll talk about this as we get into the drills. What should be happening to your O2 saturation, and I would bet every one of you, and we'll test somebody tonight, is your O2 saturation should be going down as you exercise. So what's O2 saturation mean? It means that every rep, like most of us are running around 95 to 98% saturation. If I exercise, I should be offloading oxygen. So what that saturation means is 98% of your red blood cells have oxygen combined to them via hemoglobin. If I'm exercising, hopefully I'm getting rid of oxygen, throwing it off, right? So I can use it. But most people's O2 sat goes up. Why? Too much air. We're not getting any better at utilizing the O2 we already got. Does that kind of make sense? We're going to explain this a little further later. But if we get more efficient in using O2, our breathing rate goes down, we're not working as hard, we're overall more efficient. That's why this stuff is about performance, guys. Like, I wish this room had 100 people in it. Like, I am more passionate about this than anything we do because I'm telling you right now, it change more for, like, if you're a cyclist, a runner, CrossFit, like, your sleep apnea, snoring, than anything you will do. I can promise you that, if you get it down. Now, a guy that does a lot of work in this field is named Peter McCallum, wrote a book called The Oxygen Advantage. He went so far as to say mouth breathing is such a big problem when we breathe through our nose that he was doing research with those breather eye strips and he started putting them on his mouth at night. And then he started putting them on his kids' mouths. I'm not recommending that. But if you can't stop yourself from breathing in through your mouth at night, you got to do something at some point. It's just like if I have somebody with a wrist injury and they keep sleeping like this at night, they're not getting oxygen up here. There's no way we're going to get anywhere with this. So sometimes we'll have to like put an arm inside a shirt, a belt around here, so they get better perfusion to this thing to heal. Same thing, like we may need a crutch. This is extreme, but that's how, I mean, we need to think about this as like, why can't I breathe through my nose the way I need to be able to, right? Like, it just doesn't make sense. So nasal breathing, why is it so important? Warms, humidifies, purifies air. You got little hairs in your nose, right? Guys are really conscious of cutting them out and stuff. You got little cilia, so micro hairs. We have these rolling kind of caverns called turbinates that basically roll the air through, so we purify it, we humidify it, and we warm it. You can take 72-degree air, which is about what we're in right now, and in the time it takes the air to go from your nose to your lungs, it's 98.6. If it goes through your mouth, it hits about 86 degrees. Can you imagine if you're in a 30-degree weather? That's the cold air in your lungs. What's that cause? Bronchoconstriction, increased mucus production, all these things that you do not want if you're, and I'm using running because we're talking about performance. I don't care if you're a mom walking around Disneyland with a kid. All right, this stuff can affect you the same way. Hardwired for diaphragmatic breathing. So do this for me. Everybody take a big breath through your mouth. Now take a big breath through your nose. Hard, like it's here, right, already. Still a little bit if we're not programmed to it, but like we're hardwired neurologically. If we breathe through our nose, it's easier here. So it should make sense that that's the way we should be breathing, right? Release of nitric oxide. Again, I won't nerd out on it too much. Nitric oxide, if you take pre-workout ever, that's usually what they put it in to give you the feel that it's doing something, regardless if it is or not. So NO2 gives you vasodilation and a pump. So some people that are really sensitive to it get red and really flushed because it makes you kind of tingly. Well, NO2 does exactly that, vasodilates. So it's going to help O2 proliferation, perfusion to the muscles, the tissues, everything like that. It also gives us a little boost in some other things, if you can imagine. It's like natural Viagra. Not that anybody's got any problems with that. You may want to breathe through your nose if you do. We'll just leave it at that, okay? Crucial for restful sleep. Like I said, if you wake up, this is what most people with sleep apnea say, right? This is why they end up going to get a sleep study. I wake up tired every day, even 9, 10 hours of sleep. Well, you can imagine why, because they're waking themselves up multiple times during the night. Also, if I'm basically at a poor utilization of oxygen, you're constantly working, right? So you're at a higher metabolic rate than you would be if you're breathing through your nose. So it's twofold, that you are waking up and you're also working harder than you should for rest. And efficiency during exercise, we've kind of already hit on that. So this is where you should be hopefully formulating questions. This is what I get questioned about all the time. Well, it's one of our Iron Truck buddies came up to me the other day. I want to come to your breathing thing, but I can't breathe through my nose. Why not? I broke it 4 times. Okay, have you been see somebody about that? Yeah, that's why I needed surgery. You get surgery. No. Okay, that's your issue. That's your stop block, right? That's where you're at. So there are people that are going to have deviated septums. Funny thing is, about 85% of people across the world, not America, have deviated septums. Some are worse than others, right? You can get complete occlusion. So if you do one nostril versus the other, right? So do this for me. So do one nostril, breathe in and out. Do the other. Barring any congestion, is there a difference? Right? Patency issues. So that's your septum usually. Right? I've broken my nose a couple times. I have a different septum on each side. But things like polyps do occur in your nose and your sinuses. You can have sinus impactions. Chronic sinus infections will definitely affect this. So there are things that are going to impede your ability. And I work very closely with 2 really good ENTs, where if somebody's like, I can't breathe through my nose, we do drills because we'll do like nasal unblocking drills, they can't get it, you gotta go to an ENT. I can't perform balloon sinuplasty, even though we have a professor that tries to all the time. We can't. So there are problems that lie outside our realm. So here's where we're all gonna do a test. So this test is, who has went to an allergy or asthma clinic or to somebody for breathing problems ever in your life? Okay. So, dealt with asthma for how long?
Maybe first grade.
Yeah, so quite a while, right? First grade. So that's what we got to question. And right, there are some people that really have asthma. I'm not saying asthma is not real. Asthma is getting misdiagnosed as breathing dysfunction, right? So we can't tell, but what we can tell is if I go to a asthma allergy clinic or a respiratory therapist, what do you usually do? called a spirometer, right? So they're looking for basically your base lung volume, right? So if you know what a spirometer is, so it looks like a little tube that goes up into an L, and it's got what looks like milliliters on it, and it goes usually from 0 all the way to around 800 or 900. They say average is around 6 to 650, right? So if you've ever heard of really good athletes, they'll be like, man, they have 6.5 liters of air volume in their lungs. The top of the line, like Kylian Jornet, they say they got like 8.9, right? Who knows? Doesn't matter though. Not if you can't use it, it doesn't make a difference. But you usually blow into this little thing. The crazy thing is, what are we doing? Usually breathing in through your mouth, out through your mouth, as hard as you can. So if I'm constantly over breathing, it's like if I had a glass of water that's filled to the brim, and I just kept filling it up. That's literally what we're testing in most breathing clinics, is your ability to blow out what you already can't use. So who cares? It's literally, it's like if you came in and you said, I have neck pain, and I took your blood pressure, and it was perfect, and I said, we should probably get you on blood pressure medication. I gave you a test. I don't know, like it could have been off, it could have been on, and I'm still going to get the same treatment. Right? That's kind of messed up, but and then once you get on the medication, a whole other problem, right? Because now you're getting that false bronchodilation, and you start shutting down that process. So the Beau test looks at the blood oxygen level, looks at two things: relative breathing volume, so relative to your own ability to hold your breath on an exhale, not your ability to force air out of your lungs. Also determines ventilatory response to CO2. CO2 is the star of this lecture, right? Like we're seeing, if CO2 is the catalyst for me to release oxygen, I better be able to tolerate a pretty high amount of it, because what happens is I start burning my muscle, right? CO2 gets released. If I have a really low tolerance, I need more air, right? That's my brain thinks, at least. So what does this test consist of? We've already been doing the first part, breathing normally, all this through our nose, because we've been talking about it for 5 to 10 minutes, more than that. So what we're going to do, we're going to do this in a second all together, is on a regular exhale, right? So it's going to be a regular, not a big inhale, regular inhale, regular exhale. At the bottom of the exhale, you hold your breath. And we're going to pinch our nose so we're not cheating. And everybody's going to raise their hand, okay? So it's going to look like this. And what you're doing is you have to go until your first urge to breathe. This is not a maximal breath hold. The only person you're cheating if you try to go maximal, like we're not impressing anybody here, okay? So that first urge can be a couple things, and this is hard because this is subjective, right? It could be like you're kind of having a little spasm, right? If you ever hold your breath, it's kind of like that. Like you're almost trying to swallow your own air. It's that first urge to breathe. You're going to let your hand down. I'm going to have a timer up here, and we're going to do it 3 times, okay? And we just want to see what the time frame is on that. And after we do that, we'll look at time charts, and we're going to see where you guys fall on this. But to be able to change something, we got to be able to get a baseline. And this is not a diagnosis, right? This is a baseline test. We're trying to see where are you guys at, what's your utilization, what's your relative volume, and then from there we know, do we need to work on it? Do we need to not? Should you even be in here? Or should you really be at the doctor's office, right? Can you not breathe through your nose? Like, do you have a true, restrictive breathing disorder, right? There are real breathing disorders out there. Most accurate first thing in the morning. You can imagine if you breathe restfully for 6 to 8 hours, this test is going to be very accurate, just like we take basically heart variability first thing in the morning, right? Because we don't want to be talking to you, I get amped up, I go over here, do this, do that, and then I say, yeah, it's time to do a test. Like it's going to be different every time. So the reason I bring up the morning is I encourage you guys for the next 30 days to just test this every morning. You literally all you need, pick up your phone and use a timer. And just see. Because if you're doing the drills, you want to see if it's changing. I can also guarantee you if you stop doing the drills, it's going to go right back down. Right? And being aware of how we breathe throughout the day will help a little bit, but this is just like building muscles, man. You got to keep working or you lose it. So we're going to test this. You guys ready? So just be breathing normal. So this is going to be up to you, right? Because I can't say everybody inhale, everybody exhale. So what you do is you just take a normal inhale, normal exhale. When I start the timer, you watch your time. So if you start at 2 seconds, you subtract it off that, but I can't catch you all on, it's going to be a little false. Okay, so you're going to do this. Whenever you have that first urge to breathe, bring your hand down, just pay attention to the time. You kind of keep holding your times, we do it 3 times, and we want to see are they averaged pretty well, or is there a 10-second and a 15-second, right? So Whenever you guys are ready, I'm going to start this timer.
I'm not sure, say that again,
So what we're doing is we're going to take a normal size inhale, normal size exhale. At the bottom of the exhale, you're going to pinch your nose, put your arm up, hold your breath. And all you're doing is, so it's at the bottom of your exhale. So I'm not breathing in, I'm breathing out, holding on the exhale, hand up. When I feel that first urge to breathe, it's hand down. So we're just seeing what can you do with the air that you have left in there, right? So you have a thing called tidal volume, and you have reserve, right? So tidal is what's coming in and out like a tide, right? Reserve is going to be what's left. We always have air in there, around 200 liters, or 200 milliliters, sorry, that would be a lot. A lot. Gigantic. All right, so you guys ready? And you can take your own time, right? Just subtract whatever seconds you started off at the beginning. I think we can. Less than 10 seconds, and these are broad strokes, right? This is not textbook. So we're probably going to be looking at breathing problems at rest. Things like true asthma, restrictive disorder, COPD, obesity, that's going to affect us greatly, mechanics and respiration. Less than 20, problems during exercise. You're going to find yourself getting winded, things like that, because your basically O2 utilization is depleted, right? 40 seconds plus is ideal for somebody who's just exercising. This is not like elite athlete. Elite athlete, we're looking at like a minute 30. You may say, that's how long I hold my breath on an inhale. Well, think about it like this. If you can take in about 300 mLs of air, right, that's a lot of O2. So you should be able to utilize it, and then think of like a free diver, 9 to 11 minutes. So if you can't hold it for a minute 30 on an exhale, I'm not saying you have to be able to. We're going to have we're all different volumes, and we have different metabolisms. But 40 seconds is pretty easy, right? But you guys can see 20 was about our average overall, right? Somewhere around there, which is pretty good, right? That's a good baseline. But what we see a lot of people in here is like 10 to 15, right? You know something's going on there. And this is subjective, but the more you do, you're like, yeah, that's that first inkling, right? So as you go over the 30 days, you're going to get a more consistent number if you decide to go with this. So now that we have all this data, one piece, what do we want to change, right? So we know we need to increase CO2 tolerance. Is that making sense to everybody, right? Decrease O2 saturation during exercise. The exact opposite of what most people would think. I can't tell you how many people, like I follow a lot of people in my field, right, colleagues and people that teach breathing, that put these on people and take pre and post exercise, and they think that they're really fancy because it's like 99 or 100% O2 sat after a hard, like interval intensity workout. Like, that is not, like that already makes sense to you guys hopefully, right? Like I'm not utilizing what I have in the tank. So literally you're just showing me evidence that like the way you're training people is not good. Like congrats. Decrease respiration rate. So we get taught in school, it's anywhere from 10 to 14 breaths, right? Is normal resting breaths per minute, 10 to 14 breaths. We should be probably down around 10. Women breathe a little faster than men, right? So maybe it's 12. But 10 is going to be around our ideal. Most people that we see, it's around 16 to 18. Right? It's just if you're breathing too much too often, that's what you're going to get. Decrease breathing volume. That should make sense too, and that's one of our big drills. It's the too often, but it's also the too much. We do not need that much air, so we need to create something called air hunger, which we're going to talk about quite a bit. And then overall, just the goal with all of these is filling up the cup of efficiency, physiologic and mechanical. Now, if we can improve all that stuff, hopefully we improve some of these things you guys have heard of. So VO2 max. Let's explain what VO2 max is, just so we know. It's basically the maximum capacity of your body to transport and utilize oxygen over 1 minute during maximal or exhaustive exercise. Who has had their VO2 max tested ever? Nobody? Okay. So have you ever seen somebody, like picture, right? They're hooked up to a big tube, they're on a treadmill, they got electrodes on their chest, so they're doing basically an EKG with an FEV1. The funny thing is, what do? Pinch your nose, big breathe through your mouth. They have to do that because they're looking at off-gassing. You don't off-gas CO2 the same through your nose, which is because partly you release nitric oxide. They have to do it to measure, but what's funny is we're measuring the poor way to breathe. right? So again, which we know, like the reason this got so popular is the guy named Jack Daniels, really cool name, right? Big in the running community. But he started creating workouts based off people's VO2 max, and basically a percentage of their VO2 max, and built the workout backwards from that. I've always personally thought that was a really bad idea. The more I've learned about breathing, I think it's like just garbage. I hate to say that. You guys know mine, I'll tell you what I feel. It just doesn't make any sense, right? Because the other part of the equation is, which we're seeing more now, is you can have athletes that have really poor VO2 max scores that are far better athletes endurance-wise than people that have stellar VO2 max scores, so it's not a good correlate either. So if something isn't a good test to begin with, it's a bad correlate that we should really be getting rid of it. But we don't because it's so ingrained in exercise physiology. But we can improve this, right? So just because it's a bad test, if it improves, that still means we're getting better. If that's the gold standard, we can still use it, right? Running endurance economy, again, I put endurance in here because this doesn't mean just run, right? You can be on a rower for an hour. We still want to make it better. You could be standing at work all day. We want to make it better, okay? That's endurance. Amount of energy or oxygen consumed while running at a pace below maximum effort. To me, this is a much bigger deal because most of us don't ever tap into VO2 max. Even though we think we do, we really probably don't. So most of us are not doing a maximum effort for a minute, right? That's like a 400, around there, right? Really fast. Not a lot of us are doing that anymore.
We better get some options around somewhere.
But we can improve. We prove all those things in the last slide. These will get better. And now we gotta know how we fix this. And this is why you got here, right? Like all this stuff I like talking to you about because I want you guys to learn so you know why the stuff I have you doing works and the brass behind it. But this is what we usually get when we try to fix stuff, right? Like these little things or this stupid altitude training mask. So the funny thing is, this version, this has a 2.0 on it. This is training mask 2. The first version went under your nose, right? So you're sucking air through your mouth. They say this is an altitude training mask. There's no way this can mimic altitude because at altitude, you have decreased O2 saturation in the environment, right? As you go up in the atmosphere, there's less O2. Just because you breathe through a mask at the same altitude does not mean you decrease the amount of O2 in each breath of air in. Does that make sense? You're not it doesn't have an oxygen filter.
So you could just breathe more, like you could just suck in more.
Yeah, what it's making you do to me is like if somebody squatted like this, and I said, you know what? I think we should put 300 pounds on your back and it'll make you really better. All you're doing is making them breathe harder in the worst way.
It's like a NASCAR restrictor plate.
Yeah. Does that make sense? Right? It's the same air. If there's a true altitude training kind of apparatus called a hypoxico, it's literally an altitude training tent. I mean, you're in the tent and they have them from the waist up or whole treadmills. I mean, that's decreasing O2 sat. You get in there and pressurize it, and I mean, that's what you have to do. Right? I was just at the Olympic Training Center at 6,300 feet of elevation. Like, that's far different than me wearing this mask. Now, does it work on your muscles of respiration? Yes. But what's the easier way to get your diaphragm to work? We already tested that, right? We did that. So I don't think this is the best way to go. Is it going to make you a stronger mouth diaphragm breather? Sure. It also makes you look like this guy. Right? You don't want to talk like him. What was up with that accent? But this is where we got to get into the last bit of nerdism, and then we're going through the drills. So the magic of CO2 is this easy, guys. So my slide will work here. So CO2 dilates smooth muscle, makes it easier for the O2 that is attached to the RBCs to get deeper into the muscle, right? If you open up the capillary beds, it's going to get out in the periphery. Regulation of blood pH. So what is in everybody's cabinet at home? Baking soda. What is the biggest part of baking soda? Baking soda, carbonate, right? CO2 in powder form, more or less. What do you get when you spray a fire extinguisher? A big cloud or a big particulate dust, right? So it creates a basic system, or brings our blood pH up. So what's really interesting is all these alkaline waters, right? And if you saw the video that came out a couple days ago, a lady tested these, and the cheaper the versions, the better they did, except Fiji. But like these were usually just as good as your like 5 bestseller of Autumn's Water, so that's outside of the breathing topic. But think about that. All these alkaline waters say that they're going to alkalite your system, which we do live in an acidic environment, which I did not talk about, but we eat a lot of processed foods and acidic foods. That's one of the theories of why we are such off-gas breathers, is we're trying to create a CO2 deficit, so we become, or sorry, a CO2 basically consumption, so we basically create a basic system. Does that make sense? So if you eat a bunch of salty processed stuff, acidity goes up, you have to regulate it somehow, right? Another thing we know from like the medical field, if you breathe too little, right? If you're in like an induced coma, you risk going into what's called alkalosis, right? You're not getting enough CO2 out. So these things are real. But regulation of blood pH is a big deal, and you can imagine what's the common metabolite in runners that we talk about? Lactic acid. How do you buffer stuff? Remember chemistry, a buffer? So it's how you negate an acid, right? CO2. So a cool little hack is a lot of runners take a little bit, like maybe a quarter of a teaspoon of baking soda, mix it with like apple cider vinegar, down it. Creates a basic system, right? It basically is going to create a better environment to release O2. Kind of cool. Offloading of oxygen from blood. This is called the Bohr effect. I'm taking you guys back to like high school chemistry here. So this is the magic. We as humans are getting worse at the Bohr effect. Right? A principle of physiology we're getting worse at because of the way we breathe. I know that sounds crazy, but that's like, I'm not pumping my own stuff here, but I'm writing a book called The De-Evolution of Human Movement. You better believe this is going to be in there. This is a big deal. All right, when we start to change physiology across the spectrum of larger groups of people, I mean, that's evolution. I don't care what you call it. Societal change, no. That's a big deal. So picture it like this. Low CO2 tolerance, the door is closed. You have oxygen in the system, right? It's bound to your blood, your RBC via hemoglobin, and it won't let go. So the safe door is shut, right? Because I'm breathing through my mouth. I'm not getting all of the good stuff I should. If I start to increase my CO2 tolerance, so the more CO2 I can handle, and my brain's like, hey, he's pretty good at this, right? I don't need to bring more air in. He can let it go. Opens the door. So what's our goal? Well, I'm the guy on the right. We'll give Scott Stearns the guy on the left. We're going to open the safe door, right? We're going to figure out how to do this super efficiently and really, really easy. And I know tonight, like, it's a lot of fancy like chemistry stuff. I don't want you guys to be disappointed by how easy the drills are. And these shouldn't be challenging. Does that make sense? Like, it's the same thing if you've ever been in an office. I say what I send people out here with is the hardest thing you do well. If something's too hard, you still cheat. So you can imagine if I said, hey, our goal is to only breathe through our nose and we're going to go run a 5K. What are you going to do in the first like 200 meters? Right back to mouth breathing. But that's what we see because everything gets what I would call Americanized. We don't want to take it slow and steady, right? It's got to be like, well, slap my altitude breathing mask on, put me on a rower, and make me do power planes, and I'll get better. Oh, no, right? What did we say earlier? We're looking for that parasympathetic state. We're trying to decrease anxiety. We're trying to decrease sleep. We got to be smart and work I guess a little less hard and a little more smart this time. So here's our goals. Here's where we get into fun with it. Breathe light, breathe right. Stupid name, I didn't come up with it. So, supine diaphragmatic breathing, I did. You can tell it's just a nerdy description. And then breath hold training, which we'll go into how to use breath hold training. Not like free diver style, like breath hold during like warm-ups and walking and sitting around to really like set the stuff on fire. So this breathe light, breathe right, you guys have been doing one portion of it. So you have to be breathing through your nose only. Now, I'm going to challenge you guys to do this at rest only in the beginning, because if we do this walking, like if you're, like say your bolt score is down around 10 to 15, like I can guarantee you're not going to get very many paces before you either feel like, I can't breathe through my nose only, and then we go back to, as I explained this, just normal breathing through your nose versus this kind of air hunger. So what is air hunger? When we're doing this breathe light to breathe right, the light part is you're breathing only as much as you need, both on inhale and exhale, for 10 to 15 minutes. So back in like the beginning of yoga, which was started in India around 3,000 years ago, actually to get like adolescent teen boys to shut up, right? It was basically to get them to chill out. That's why yoga was invented. They knew that like they wanted during yoga your breath to be imperceptible. So if I could look at you next to me and I could see you breathing, you weren't doing it right. That was their gauge, right? So air hunger would be me. The way that Peter McCowan explains this is you should be able to be aware of the breath coming into your nose, like feel it, and not feel it coming out, because it's going to be warm. So it's kind of the cool air in, warm air out, and it should be through your stomach, right? But it should be imperceptible. And you should feel like, man, like you're needing to breathe. Does that make sense?
The second half of the breathing should be imperceptible.
Almost all of it. So if you're going to get to a point in this where like, and I don't know if you've ever noticed this, like a lot of us when we breathe, in which we should, in between breaths, there's like usually a 3 to 5 second pause. That's normal. But if we get talking a lot or we get ramped up, there's no pause, right? And that's where the over breathing comes in. It's pouring a bottle of water into the glass full already, right? So what you're going to notice in the beginning is your rhythm is going to look like this. So it's going to be really fast, right? So air hunger, you're going to be like, even though it's small breaths through your nose, it's going to be really fast. And then over time, you're going to realize I can slow it down so it gets bigger. And then eventually what we're looking for is like this 3 to 5 second exhale, a complete pause, right? Not forced. This is just happening over the 10 to 15 minutes. And then 3 to 5 second exhale. That kind of makes sense. But if you try to do this in the beginning, just because you're like, that's what Beau told me, it's going to last a minute. Right? It's going to, and then, right? And that's what we're trying to get away from, is this thing that I have to revert to. And you're going to see it recur as we go through the drills where we're trying to not make our recovery, I don't care if it's during the drill or exercise, be, right? And your recovery is, like, I think my football coaches during high school were really not so smart in strength conditioning in a lot of ways. One thing that we're smart in, stand up and breathe through your nose, like any time, right? They didn't know any of this stuff. They just knew what worked, right? Okay? So that's what air hunger means. And if you guys have questions on this, ask away. 10 to 15 minutes a day. And here's what I challenge you with. Everybody's like, oh, I can't do that. Because most people will say, I'm not going to take 10 to 15 minutes to meditate or pray or journal. Do it at the same time. Right? If you're taking mindfulness practice, if you're meditating, what's a big part of those practices? Breathing. The imperceptible breathing also comes from like Taoist monks. So a lot of people say chase your breath into the meditation, right? Like you use the breath to basically get in touch with your body. That's mindfulness training. They wanted to get to the point where they didn't even know they were breathing. Right? Now it's just them. Right? I'm not getting all Zen Buddha on you. I'm just telling you, that's what they thought. And that's what they were looking for. 10 to 15 minutes a day. If you can only do 5, so be it. Right? But also this time frame, if we got deep into the physiology, is going to create that buffer system for us. Right? Where we're actually bumping CO2 up. Any shorter than 5 minutes, you're just breathing through your nose. You're not changing physiology at that point.
Say that again?
So if I spend about 10 minutes creating air hunger, what I'm doing is basically upping, but if I held my breath for 10 minutes, I'd have way more CO2. So all I'm doing is creating a deficit, right? Where I'm breathing in less air than I would. So the CO2 is steadily rising. And I'm over time basically trying to get my body used to that. It's like if you've ever heard of allergy treatment where little by little they induce you to it, right? So trying to titrate you. So if you're allergic to cats, like every day for 60 days, on an increasing scale, you'll get a little pinprick of some cat dander. And by the 60th day, you can hang out with a cat. Right? So by our 60th day, we want to be able to go rock a 2-mile run breathing through our nose.
So you're building CO2 tolerance.
Yeah. Just like I said, that's our like CO2 tolerance is the goal. We are all if your Bolt score was below 40, your CO2 tolerance is low. I know this seems very backwards. It took me a while to grasp the tolerance seems backwards. If you're tolerant to CO2, because just think as you run or you work, CO2 is building up, right? We know we're breathing out CO2. If I can handle more CO2, that means that I don't need as much air, so I can just keep releasing oxygen from my red blood cells and keep going, right? So now I'm doing the same amount of work as the guy next to me, but I'm more efficient because my red blood cells know what the hell to do. Does that make sense? I want you guys to get that, because that's the whole point of this whole thing, is that. All right?
Increased
Yeah.
CO2 signals for the hemoglobin to release oxygen.
Yeah, via area in your midbrain. Yeah. So your breathing center is in your midbrain, like around your brainstem. So it's basically telling that area, like, hey, like you have to let more O2 go, right? And the funny thing is, when you get into like really like breath hold training, like with free divers, it's almost like if you've ever started a weightlifting program, the first 2 weeks is all neurologic gain, right? You get really strong really fast. Nothing changed in the fiber level. What we know from breath hold training is in those first like 2 weeks, it's all not neurologic, but probably like mental. It's you overriding that area in your medulla, right? It's like you have access to more O2 release than you're allowing, but what do you feel? That first urge to breathe, and you let it go. But what's a more dangerous way to practice breath holding? Breath hold maximal, breath hold until you almost pass out. Right? If you guys know the runner Galen Rudd, he's really notorious for passing out while he's running because Alberto Salazar uses breath hold training while they're doing repeats. So he'll be having headphones in and Alberto's yelling at him like when he's supposed to breathe because they'll do an exhale, breath hold on the end of like 200s and 400s to maintain form with oxygen depletion. He'll pass out. It's like a fainting goat. Right? But what's he trying to do? He's trying to override his burning. Right? I'm a huge endurance nerd, so if you've ever heard the central governor theory, there's a lot of thought that like we're actually not fatigued when we feel fatigue. It's your brain saying, I'm going to make you feel fatigued so you really don't get there. Because if you do, that's kind of dangerous. Right? If you run your muscles out of energy, glycogen, all that stuff, that's when you truly do start cramping, right? Or like lock up. If you go to the point where your kidneys fail, dangerous stuff. So what would make sense? That your brain would override it. That's called the central governor theory. So what your brain is doing is picking up these subtle cues from lactic acid, from CO2, from these things and saying, I can pretty much deduct that I'm done. But what do we see in a lot of marathoners? Trashed at mile 23, kicked 26.2 or 26.1, 2.2.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. If you were trashed, you should be out of energy. You didn't like magically get a donut from the heavens and take off, right? You didn't get any more energy. You override that process. Not all of the time. This is what I got to get across to some of you. Okay? Hey, I'll tell you how it is. If you try to breathe through if you leave and you're like, Beau told me, breathe through your nose is better for you, and if you can go run 2 miles, it's better for you, and yeah. You're going to have to run so slow, or row so slow, or lift so little weights that you lose the other end of training. Right? It's this mix, and that's why we're going to talk about doing this in your warm-up, or doing it at the very beginning of the run, or in your drills, or at home. I do have certain runs where I challenge myself, hey, I'm going to go run 4 miles on flat ground and try to just breathe through my nose. I don't usually make the whole run, but I'm every once in a while just to see like what would my pace be. That can't be every day. You would be like, you'd never get anywhere. You'd be going backwards. Does that make sense? So this is just a cool little quote. Told you about the Taoist monks. So Lao Tzu, a good runner leaves no tracks. But when he was talking about this, he was talking about basically breathing during running. Right? So it wasn't only like my tracks in the sand. It was like, can you hear me coming? Would you know I'm in front of you, behind you? All that stuff. Another cool thing from running, I'm such a big nerd, I think you can kind of see this guy smiling, right? He has his mouth closed. When they went, this is the Taru Mar tribe, right? They got really popular with the book Born to Run. If you haven't read it, even if you're not a runner, you should. It's a really, really good book. When they saw the gringos running, right? Because all these people started going down to the canyons and doing these races. They thought it was really weird that everybody, even Scott Jurek, right, the best runner at the time, was breathing through their mouth. And they would kind of like, ask in his ear, like, what's wrong with them? Are they sick? Right? And even if you watch it, like go YouTube some of the videos, and you'll even watch, like, they run 200 miles at a time. When they come in for recovery, they're, right? Reason being, I don't know this, but here would be my theory. They've been doing this for hundreds, if not thousands of years, right? They have a very basic, not like basic, basic pH diet, right? Corn, honey, obviously your chia seeds that we just thought were superfoods after this book came out for some reason. Also, they live in a very dry and arid environment. So what do we say breathing through your nose does? Humidifies air. If I breathe through my mouth and I run 200 miles and I live in a desert, I'm not going to make it, right? I'm going to be expelling my own liquid, right? I'm also going to be taking in particulate matter from that dry arid environment, right? Which I'm not filtering through my nose. So if that makes sense, it should make sense that we also, even though this isn't dry and arid, like this is also was it the number 1 or number 2 most polluted city in America for a while? Right? I think it was number 2.
Back in the day.
Yeah, back in the day. I mean, we can't.
He was number 1.
Yeah, I mean, we're still not great. We're doing a lot better, but like, even though we think we live in clean environments, we don't. So I can promise you this: when you're breathing through your mouth, you're taking in things that you can't filter out, which makes it harder for your body to process. Not saying that's going to stop you in your tracks by any means, but it's in the long run, no pun intended, make a big deal. Okay, so let's try. I know this is just practice, and these drills are easy. So let's try this breathe light to breathe right. So what we're doing, like I said, I would like everybody sit up in your chair, so you're just in kind of a good posture. So what we're trying to do is just breathe as little as possible, right? And this doesn't mean you're holding your breath at all. Air is coming out, air is coming in, but I'm not taking like my normal breaths. I'm not. So if I can hear you breathing, if I can see you breathing, we're probably not doing it quite right. And I hope you think this is like so mundane and boring. You're like, this is what I'm getting. You bet it, because you don't do it, right? Even if I said, hey, if I just like you came in and I was like, guess what, guys? Giving you all your money back, just go breathe through your nose. You wouldn't get any better. I can promise you that. You know why? Because you're still going to be in CO2 debt, because you're still going to over-breathe, right? That's what you do if you just tried to go outside and run even 25 meters. It would be, because we'd be so, abhorrent we haven't ever done that, right? So just breathe in as little as you can, 10 to 15 minutes. Right? We're not going to practice it for 15 minutes. I agree, that would be super boring. Okay? But we compare this with journaling, meditation, prayer, and we're going to see that we can build this into our routines, right? So when I go into a warm-up now, like we'll talk about breath hold stuff. During my warm-up, I'm making sure that I'm doing this, right? So I'm not, and a lot of the times, like I work out in Iron Shower, Skylift, we're doing like some higher intensity stuff sometimes. I'm making sure that when I'm only doing smaller reps of the same movements I'm going to do later, that I'm breathing as little as I need, right? Twofold. I'm actually changing my physiology, but I'm also trying to mess with my brain, right? I don't want to get myself in the habit of thinking, man, these box jumps are going to wear me like, this is tough. I'm like, no, what's it going to be like in round 5? It'll definitely get me. Also during just walking, right? So now we are challenging the metabolic system a little bit. And we can kind of say, if, say you walk your dogs around the neighborhood, maybe you spend that time doing it, right? And if you're like, man, I'm starting to the point where I can't do it, you gotta slow down, right? A little side note here is, what's really popular in the endurance world right now is heart rate measurement, right? Basing your workouts like the MAF tone method and all these things in your MAF score. I always laugh when people say my MAF scores. I'm like, yeah, I got a speech impediment. But using heart rate and heart rate variability as your markers for workouts. So going back to the Tarahumara, they had on average during their runs, like we're talking these 100-mile runs, a heart rate of about 130 beats per minute. The average heart rate of our Olympic marathoners in the middle of a marathon is around 160 to 180. So if you try to say, well, I'm going to math method these guys, you would ruin them. Right? Because now you would say, well, their max heart rate is lower, threshold-wise, than our Olympic marathoner, so I want them to run around 100. So you just slowed them down probably about 2 hours over a 100-mile race. But they could. Does that make sense to everybody? So what could we use as a more natural, don't need a bunch of electronics? Breath. Right? So being able to do certain activities, exercises, drills with a lower level of exertion or more efficiency is what I would be going for. And again, that's not all the time, that's some of the time. But if you find every bout of exercise, aerobic activity, or walking around your block is maxing out your breathing, we got a problem. Right? And that would be the first of what I do. So now we'll get into a little more practice. If you guys have been in our office, this is like our baseline position. Right? At one time, I thought I was going to have the walls set up when we built this office, so this is how, there were no chairs. You came in to rest in this position, so I didn't have to work on it. But that to me would have been like saying, just breathe through your nose, right? Like you could have gotten this position, not been doing it right, so that we got rid of that. So what we're gonna do is we're all gonna flip around and we're gonna put our feet where our butts are. We're gonna lay down on the ground here. And if you've been in my office and done this, even if you haven't, maybe you've done it, we're gonna do it now. So what everybody's gonna look like is just what this guy looks like. And a couple points here. We want our knees right above our hip line. So we're gonna scoot our butts probably a little closer to our chairs for everybody. And then we just want arms on the ground by our body, palms up to the ceiling. And what we really want to work on, this is like the anti-CPR move. We want to tuck our chins and then make sure our head's flat on the floor. Does that make sense? So if your chin is poking up to the ceiling, we're actually occluding, we look like a snorer, right? We want to be here. And then we're going to put one hand, I don't care which hand it is, on your sternum, one hand on your belly button. Now what we're trying to get is we're trying to get the top hand to move very little and the bottom hand to move as we breathe into our nose. So this is going to be diaphragmatic respiration or belly breathing.
Surprise.
Is everybody getting that? So chin stuck, yeah. You need a pillow. Some people will need a pillow just based on stiffness in the neck. Now make sure your mouth is closed, jaws relaxed, neck's relaxed. So even though I'm telling you to tuck your chin, like get it there, but then let it go. And I want the bottom hand moving only. So this belly breathing thing has been really popular as of late too, because there's a lot of good things about it. One thing that gets kind of messed up or not so right is we think we should only have the bottom hand move. So think of your hole from the bottom of your neck to around your waistline as like a barrel. When we're breathing in, the whole thing should be expanding horizontally, so outwards. What we're trying to not have happen is if this hand that's on your chest or your sternum should not be moving up and down, right? So it shouldn't be moving up towards your head. That would be called vertical breathing or apical, so it would look like this, right? What we're trying to get is expansion, so horizontal with each breath. That's where it changes when I talk about the kids that are about 6 to 8 years old, as we see kids change from horizontal breathers, think of babies, right? Big old Buddha bellies, really good horizontal breathers. That's what changed around 6 to 8 years old as we start mimicking our parents, and all of a sudden we got this apical breathing pattern. And then it sticks, right? And then we stack restrictive clothing on it, because what do most kids wear when they're younger? They're wearing sweats and all sorts of stuff they can move around in, and they start slapping on some cool looking clothes, and they get a little self-conscious, start sucking in, they go to the pool, who knows, right? And then we got this breathing dysfunction.
Gymnasts are good leotards.
Now, I think we should be able to shove most of these drills, we got 3 big ones, almost all into one. So what else could we be working on in this position? Breathe light and breathe right. Right? So maybe if you're going to spend 10 to 15 minutes a day doing the breathe light drill, right, where we're breathing as little in and out through our nose as we can, creating air hunger, we do it in this position. So now we're more aware of diaphragmatic breathing. So now we're knocking off 2 birds with 1 stone.
So this isn't trying to get a lot of air in.
No, so we'll talk about that. So I'm not saying a big breath is a bad thing, because what do we talk about with one of the perks of diaphragm breathing was that organ pumping, right? So if we're wanting every once in a while to get some like organ movement, hopefully that's coming in exercise, right? So I'm not having to think about like, oh, today at noon it's my organ pumping breathing time, right? And I'm going to take 10 big breaths, like, you know. We're going to exercise. That's if we're breathing correctly during exercise, you get a lot of that stuff. But when you don't see that, more so is in people that have things like COPD, right, where they cannot get air. Like it is hard for them to get air in their lungs. So an obstructive disorder, it's hard for them to get in. So they can't even get this going up. So it's like they're not getting movement. So that's not the bulk of healthy individuals. Just want to bring that up because it is a big deal, and that's why you also in our clinic we do some like myofascial stuff with like balls like through the gut, so we kind of get the organs working a little better. So everybody got a good sense of that. right? So that bottom hand, we're looking for more movement, but what I don't want you to think is that the top hand isn't moving. It should be moving outwards and inwards, so towards the ground, away from the ground, horizontal, just not up towards your ears. That's what we see is one of the most common kind of faults or dysfunctions in breathing now. And you can imagine if you did that, it's going to create a ton of tension around the neck musculature, suboccipital, jaw musculature, all this stuff. Now, one more tidbit, just because Kyle reminded me of it here. So I don't know if anybody else has any TMJ issues or anything, but when we're just chilling out during the day, the resting position of your mouth, since we're breathing through our nose, the resting position of your mouth is lips together, teeth barely apart. Your tongue is at the intersection of the top of your teeth and the roof of your mouth. That is the anatomical resting position of your mouth. Now, I tell people that if they do have TMJ issues, because a lot of people with TMJ issues are clenchers, right? So they're constantly trying to find occlusion by clenching or grinding their teeth. What we're actually trying to do is just get you to realize if you are clenching that you need to have a little baby space in between your teeth and let that tongue rest on that kind of intersection of the roof of your mouth and your teeth. All right. Any questions about this?
So if you're breathing like you said, creating the air,
Mm-hmm.
how do you, I feel like nothing moves.
Exactly. And what did I say? Imperceptible breathing.
Or I mean like, I feel like none of this moves, like my hands.
Perfect. So what I'm trying to get you to realize is, if say I'm tag teaming these, this drill is demonstration, right? So I'm saying if you're going to get into this position, like I usually have people in this position for what, like back pain, neck pain, right? So we basically like iron out your posture using the floor. If you're down here and you're working on, hey, am I good at diaphragmatic breathing? Yeah. Take some big breaths so you can feel it. But I don't think we need to work on that a lot, right? Because what are we already doing? Over breathing. So what I'm saying is maybe get down there, maybe you take 10 big breaths to like get you started, right? Feel that it's going down here and then go into the air hunger stuff. If you want to, or you could just do it seated. You could be journaling away, you could be whatever, riding in your car to work, right? But what I'm trying to get you to realize is it's far more about creating that CO2 tolerance. And if we just get down here, we're not necessarily perpetuating the problem, but we're not definitely going in the right direction either. Okay? But yeah, I don't want you to feel anything if we're doing air hunger. Right? It should be such a small breath that it's just like this little, like, think of a baby, like literally think of a baby breathing. Like, have you ever seen a mom like the cheek test? Right? They don't know if they're like, because they're so chilled, like they don't know if they're breathing. Like that's what we should kind of strive for. Okay? All right, let's hop on back up. Hopefully nobody's asleep. Now, I've got videos on all of these if you guys want them. I don't think we need one on the breathe like, breathe right, because that's a really hard video to shoot, right? Have to scope open those. But this is a big deal. If you do suffer from back pain, things like that, that position is a very good position, because you can imagine if I'm on the floor, and let's say I've got a really curved thoracic spine, or I got this J-low posture, you basically get to iron all that out via the floor, right?
It hurts though.
Laying on the floor?
Laying on the floor.
Perfect. So I have, and I say that not like crassly, but like I work with a lot of golfers. You get a 75-year-old golfer that looks like this, and if I lay them on the floor with their feet on the wall or up on a couch for 10 minutes, you'd be amazed at how much better their posture looks. Because literally it's like ironing out their spine, right? You're not having to use any muscles, but you're imposing, that's why it hurts, usually. That's why I don't want people to do it on. A lot of people say, can I do it on the bed? No, because what do you get on the bed? You get to sink into your normal position. So I want the floor to impose a flattening effect, right? So we feel contact.
But you can put your feet up on the bed.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want something, a harder surface. A lot of people want to like lay on a bed and put the feet up on the headboard or wall, because you know, like, you know, we especially get like memory foam. Now you just look at the exact center, just laying on your back. Right? We want this effect, and also, without explaining too much, can you see how this is a perfectly straight line, right? Head's not cocked back, we're also not flexed forward. Like we get a pillow sometimes, we get like this in bed, right? We also don't want to be here. Like this is our neutral position, and when we talk about this whole text neck epidemic, we see this, and you can imagine if I lay down on my back, that's what I look like. right? So we're trying to literally get you guys to use what's called your deep neck flexors, which will also open up your airway. The whole, and then you could challenge me and say, well, I took CPR, which we did hopefully. And then, you know, head, what is it? Head, chin, tilt? Yeah, right, hook, and you're opening the airway. The reason you do that is that's an unconscious victim, right? They don't have control of their glottis now. So their glottis could be closed, it could be open, so the best way to do it then is to do this and you bypass that. If I can control it via my own, which this is an autonomic function, right? I'm not in control of it. It should be operating properly. So where is it not operating optimally? When I'm asleep, right? I'm in the realm between conscious and unconscious, right? Now every once in a while, what do we get? Like I'm almost dead. So I was joking about my dad, but it's a little bit true. Okay, so here's...
Were you saying
Yeah.
about the pillows, that if that's our neutral position, then the memory type thicker pillows are not good? And
So yeah, a lot of people ask me, like, I think I've seen like 3 people this week that they came in with neck pain, they like blame it on their pillow, and they were like, yeah, King came today, yeah. So what I always tell people is, your pillow probably didn't cause it, it probably ain't helping it, right? So like one guy came in, he just paddleboarded for like 3 hours, and then he also had a new pillow, and he woke up, he's like, I gotta get a memory foam, curved pillow, he's like, oh, it's wrecking me. Well, it probably ain't helping you, this guy's also stuck here. So when he lays down, he can't get his head to the floor, right? Literally can't get his head to the floor unless he's like this. So you can imagine how if you had a memory foam or a cervical curved pillow, it's gonna wreak havoc, right? Cervical curved pillows have been researched quite a bit because they've been sold for quite a few years, and they actually make necks worse. You can imagine why. If you sleep on it a little wrong, now it's no longer the perfect posture. It's like throwing you in a side bend, and you sleep on your stomach, obviously it's not gonna be good. So what I tell everybody, and this is kind of just across the board, so we slept for thousands of years without pillows, right? We didn't have, unless, I don't know, maybe we used rocks or something, we're just a lot tougher, I don't know. But when we sleep on our side, what do we usually do? Arm goes here. So if you use a pillow, it should just keep your head in line, right? So your head shouldn't be laterally tilted, and definitely shouldn't be laterally tilted towards your pillow. Right? If you do, you got too thin of a pillow, got too fat of a pillow. Pillow's over here. Same thing for if you're a back sleeper. If it's putting you in a bunch of flexion, like you got 2 pillows, it's too much. So you gotta take it down to 1. If you're sleeping on your stomach, which a lot of people are like, don't sleep on your stomach, like, you need to sleep first. If that's the only way you can sleep, do it. You know, like I'm good. But you shouldn't be sleeping on your stomach on a pillow. You should be on the mattress. Because now I'm like this. Not just like this, like, yeah, having your head in maximal rotation all night is probably not great for a lot of things. But if that's the only way you can sleep, sleep is more important than the mechanical dysfunction that takes place in your neck. That's what drives me nuts. What's that?
It's kind of all of that.
What about massage table? Absolutely. Does that make
yeah, would sleeping on your back without a pillow be good or bad? Or you need something kind of...
I would say good, but most of us are really stiff through our thoracic spine. So you can imagine, if I'm a little curved here and I go to lay down, the only way I can get my head to the floor is usually this. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So back in the good old day, when we didn't have these problems, if I laid down, this would probably be natural. Does that kind of make sense? So this is kind of our standard operating procedure these days.
Mm-hmm.
Just because that's what we live in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, yeah, sleeping on your back without a pillow would be ideal, but most of us can't. Little kids can't all the time, right? Catch a little kid, like they're just dead and they're neutral, right?
Yeah, the corpse close.
Yeah. But we build our own kind of coffin with this stuff, right? Like a position doesn't break you. That's where I'm always like, posture isn't the thing that's hurting you. Like, it's everything else, right? Your posture is a manifestation of what you're doing a lot of. People think it's the other way around. Like, oh, if I sit up really tall, I'll be fine. Like, you still, like, within 20 minutes, you're right back here and you don't know it. That's where all these little, like, they came and went really fast, these little, like, vibrating monitors, right? They go off and they tell you to sit up straight. Or it's supposed to, like, your micro breaks, get up and walk around. Like, you just need to be moving all the time, right? We were not meant to, you know, the sit to stand desk thing, like, people are just making money off of it. That's my take. I mean, they literally are. It's like dynamic ergonomics is what the field is called. used to be called ergonomics. I know we're getting a little off topic, but ergonomics was how do I set up your desk and your workstation to basically make it like anatomically and structurally efficient for you. What have I found out? You're still sitting still. I'm just in a really, really good position to basically create more money for the company with less claims on my insurance. That's what it was for. Then this new thing came along about 3 years ago, really pioneered by Kelly Starrett, where it was like this sit to stand thing, sitting is new smoking, and dynamic ergonomics. What's that mean? Get off your butt and move. Dynamic ergonomics. So now I sit for a while and I stand. Or I sit and I stand and work my desk, or I walk on my treadmill. The whole thing is, this is, again, I hate to brings back, that's the premise of the book I'm writing, right? This is my opinion, that's why it's my book. We are evolving to get better at this stuff, but we're demonizing it. What we need to realize is, we're just doing, just like what I said about breathing, right? We're just getting better at breathing like this. Well, we're getting really good at this. Like, we have far better fine motor skill than we used to 50 years ago. What we also have is about 25% decrease in grip strength compared to our parents. Stuff changes, man, right? So if we go back to the breathing part, like if I try to sleep in what so-and-so told me is the optimal position, and I can't sleep or I can't breathe in that position, like now you're not getting restful sleep, which is another part of the like wellness paradigm, right? Nutrition, sleep, rest, activity, that, so I always tell people sleep how you can, right? I don't think your sleep's breaking you because it's helping you recover, right? You have to sleep in a really funky position. Every time you wake up with like a crick in your neck. But I ask all those people, what'd you do the day before? And it's gonna be a bunch of yard work. I lifted overhead. Like, it's probably not what happened at night, unless your wife's like mine, has like a twitch disorder and like punches you every once in a while.
You're really aggressive.
Yeah. Okay, so here.
You're gonna wake up with a pillow on your face.
Yes. I heard anybody twitch, live with a twitcher. Like, as they fall asleep, they like.
You do it too.
Oh, yeah.
Hers is extreme, man. It's scary. So breath holds. This is most of the time you talk about breathing seminar, this is what they want to go to right away, right? Because this is sexy stuff. Like, I want to increase your breath hold in 4 minutes. Well, are you a pearl diver that lives in Polynesia? So, like, you need to be able to do that, right? Is that a measure of being an efficient breather? That's what we should be asking, right? It's just like the spirometer test. Is it measuring anything that's valuable, or is it just cool? Yeah, I'd be able to like hold my breath for 4 minutes, but like, is that what I need to do? Is that good? I don't know. So breath holds, increase CO2 tolerance, makes sense, right? As you hold your breath, CO2 builds. So there is something there. Really cool thing here, spurs kidneys to make EPO. You may know what EPO is? Yeah, cyclists, yeah. EPO is banned in cycling, right? You can't use EPO, it's erythropoietin. It's basically what spurs your spleen to make red blood cells, right? So that's released from your kidneys. But just by doing this kind of breath hold training, they've seen results. This is over tens of thousands of people. They've been doing this for 20 years. 24% increase in EPO. You know what you get when you blood dope? About 18.
You should have said that at the beginning, I'd paid better attention.
But isn't that crazy? That we think that we need to basically get on a dialysis machine, take blood out, store it for a while, go train high, put it back in my system. Like, our physiology is far smarter than we're ever going to think we are.
Poor Lance.
Yeah. But the thing is, these guys are probably already doing a lot of this stuff too. So now we should beg the question, can you actually get any better than you already are? Like, can you stack 18% on 24%? I don't think so. There's also a limitation what your spleen can do. Because that's what I think a lot of people don't understand when we talk about blood doping, is the EPO spurs the kidney to do something. It's not just because you take the EPO, it's like this magical effect. It still has to work on your body, right? Same thing with steroids. Steroids have to create change in the musculature, right? If you didn't have enough fat in your body and you took steroids, they wouldn't work. Does everybody know that? It's a fat binding, fat soluble hormone. So if you did no fat, right? Say we went back to the margarine days, you took steroids, you wouldn't get anywhere. You just damage your liver and kidneys, right? Increase hemoglobin concentration. This is what happens when you go to altitude. right? So you get a hematocrit pack. And the reason being is the O2 is depleted, so your red blood cells are basically binding together to basically create better O2 utilization, which alerts your brain that thinks I have less red blood cells. What do you start doing? EPO comes out, you make more RBCs. This is the whole train or live high, train low, right? So if I live at altitude, I'm always spurring this reaction, but then I don't deplete or detract from my training, so I go down from altitude so I can really rock and roll and cycle and run hard. Right? But I always trained at altitude like trying to breathing through my nose all the time. You wouldn't get very far. Okay? Hematocrit percentage increases, that's one and the same. After exhale, so breath hold after exhale, which is what we're going to be working on, lowers O2 saturation, mimicking high altitude. Right? O2 sats down at high altitude. So like I said, when I work on this stuff during exercise, like we did this with our first patient that just came in for this the other day, and we did 250 meters on a rower and decreased her O2 sat by 6% in a minute, or a minute or less, just by doing the air hunger breathing on the rower. But when we let her just go, we took about a 5-minute break and just let her go like she normally does, went up to 100%. Right, so it went right back to where her problem was, and this was, I didn't tell her what happened, so I just said, well, let's do it and see, right, and it did. But what we should see is that you can almost drop your O2 sat. If you did this during hard bouts of exercise, your O2 sat should drop almost to 80%. If it starts going below 80, we get problems, right, we don't want that. But it should drop significantly, and if it's not, we're not using what we should be using. Right? So that just means we're breathing a lot. We're literally doing a lot of work. Okay? So here's how we go about it. Breath holds during warm-up. This is what I started doing about a month ago. Like if I'm going out to run, I'm doing these short-term breath holds. And it basically, if you're a runner, you always know, everybody says the first mile or two is always just like, sucks. And it's like getting into it, all this stuff. A lot of that has to do with the gaseous exchange. What do we say? Oh, you got to get blood moving, good warm up, get blood moving, all this stuff. It does. Your blood's moving all the time, right? Dilation of vessels creates a little bit more blood flow. Your blood pressure does go up a little bit. But the thing is, if you can increase that CO2 through breath holds, that gaseous exchange is actually what improves. So you get about 1.5 miles, 2 miles in, all of a sudden it's like stuff's clicking, and there we go. All right? It has nothing more to do with that. And you say, oh, it's my joints. Well, that's a totally different piece, right? But if you feel pretty good and that first mile or two still stinks, like there's something going on, right? So we make I'm always big about like warm-ups being very smart and very short. So I want the most bang for my buck, because what do we see people do? Skip warm-ups. Drives me nuts. I always say, if you can't take time to warm up, you don't have time to work out. Literally, that's the way it should be, because you're not prepping your body, so you're not going to get out of what you should. You might get hurt. Number one injury in men over 40 is Achilles ruptures. You know why? They don't warm up. They go play pickup basketball and blow their Achilles out. Right? So if I can do breath holds, I can be doing warm-up drills while I'm challenging the system a little bit, and then finish it off with some like breathe light, breathe right. I'm like, I take iron track, for example, the warm-up, listen to the coach. I'm recovering with that. I've just spent 15 minutes like doing awesome stuff versus just kind of like, my client's kicking. Like think about it. Like challenge your system, right? I want people to be smart. So it's this easy. Okay? So the kind of gold standard on this is 4 sets of a breath hold where we're doing 1 or 2 things. We could just be sitting in a chair. We could be doing it in a warm-up. A really good way to do this is walking, right? Reason walking is it's the lowest metabolic activity we do as humans. We're super efficient walkers, right? We could walk for days if we had food and water, probably longer than that. So if we're walking, we're using energy, but at a very low level, so we can always bounce back from it. We don't need a lot of recovery unless we're obese. We got other issues. So if I can do a breath hold for however many paces I can, right? Exhale, and these are maximum. Right? This isn't air. This isn't the first urge. That was the test. Right? This is maximal now. I don't want you passing out, so you're going to be aware of your own ability. But it's maximal, but it should be maximal, but I only need 3 or 4 nasal breaths to recover. Does that make sense? So if I'm walking and I do a exhale, it's an exhale hold. and I go for, let's say I'm walking my dog and I go for 2 telephone pole distances. But after that, and then I go, and then I go into the next one. Like, you've lost the entire point of this. Because what did you just do? Dump a bunch back into the system, right? And you just reset. Like, a lot of this has to do with the neurologic response at first, what we said the first 2 weeks. And then it gets into the brass tacks of the big change. Okay? So it's got to be maximal breath hold, but you got to kind of gauge it to where I can be. And then I go into that next exhale, and I'm holding at that 4th, 5th breath. Does that make sense to everybody? So it's always a breath hold on an exhale and stuff. Because what are we trying to do? Not have a bunch of O2 in the system already. So the CO2 level, I think of it like this, that they almost match. Right? Because if I took a breath in, I do have more O2 than CO2. I want them to almost match. And then as I hold my breath, CO2 outpaces O2, obviously. And then I have to spend less time holding my breath. If I take a big breath, I may get a minute, right, walking. If I do an exhale, maybe 20 seconds, but I get the same effect, if not better. So again, efficiency, big time efficiency.
So you want the recovery after your breath hold to not come through your mouth?
Exactly.
Through your nose. Okay.
Come through your nose because we're trying to train your body to realize that it doesn't, like, you're creating air hunger, but you don't need more air. What you need is better utilization of oxygen.
Through your nose?
Yes. Yeah. And this is the big thing is if we went into this in detail with exercise, what we would try to get at is to get you to realize that you need far less like breathing than you think you do. Right? Most of us get on the bike and within like a minute, right? And it only gets worse. But also what happens when you get into your warm-up, it gets better, right? To a level, and then it gets worse. Why do you think? You leveled stuff out. You literally buffered your system, but then the buffer goes the other way, right? You expelled enough CO2 where you're like, hey, I'm doing pretty good, I feel pretty. And then you actually start burning, right? Now I've been working for a little bit. Now I have way more CO2 than I can handle, but I already started the process of off-gassing too much. And now I don't know what to do with it, so what I do, I just keep going. And you may get to the point where what do you gotta do? Stop. Because you're so out of breath. What should we think we are? Full of freaking breath. You can't do anything with it.
So we're, see if I get this right.
Yeah.
We've been doing it wrong so long, we're gonna have to retrain ourselves to unlock the oxygen that we have
Yes.
all the time.
Yeah.
Rather than
Yeah.
just dumping fresh oxygen.
Yeah. Because all of us, if I put the pulse oximeter, like let's put it on this guy here, all of us are going to be, I bet, 98%. That's what humans run at. Between 95 to 98, 99. 95 gets on the lower end. The older you get, the lower it goes. Right? That's why you go, mainly because your capillary beds, right? You have less perfusion. So 98, right?
And we can't tolerate the amount of carbon.
Yeah.
That's not CO2.
Let's try somebody just a little bit different.
So then if you're better at using the oxygen that's in your system, would your heart rate then be reduced?
Yes, so and that's the TAR-UMR thing, right? 130 beats per minute over a long endurance bout. And the reason being is, really it goes down to stroke volume. So you're not having to pump out as much blood, right? Because if I can't utilize the oxygen, I need to saturate more, right? So you have to put out more blood. So yeah, it works off of that. But what have we been looking at? The second, I think that's where we get lost on heart rate stuff. You look at that and you're like, oh my God, I gotta get that down. Well, if I lower that and this is still the same, I'm actually just working way below my threshold, right? So now I'm just doing way less work. I could be way up here. So yeah, you hit the nail on the head. We're trying to unlock the safe. I got that name.
You may have unlocked something else for me too, because I've told you before, we play basketball at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I always have better stamina in the second and third games than the first game.
Yeah, and that's across the board. And what a lot of people, we always equate it to, like, we did the workout for water, right? We didn't warm up at all. I died, right? We just like got out there and did it. I literally died, right? I had to quit. I had to quit in the middle of the workout and then I got to keep going. But the third, fourth workout, I was like, those were so easy, I can't believe it. Well, what did we do? It's not the magic of, man, I'm warmed up. Your physiology is working better, right? You're literally like firing on all cylinders, and we know that, but we may not, we just say, I'm getting my blood moving, I'm getting my joints warm, I'm getting my muscles warm. I think if you know, you do more often, right? So if you're like, man, if I hold my breath a little bit during my workout, if I do less breathing or during my warm-up, I'm going to get there much faster, right? I always coach my runners in here, like, your first 2 miles, we're breathing down here. Well, now I'm coaching more, we're breathing down here, but it's very little breath, right? I'm trying to not have these massive breaths, because you don't need it yet, you think you do, right? Most of us are in far better shape when it comes to aerobic capacity than we think we are. I mean, that's what you told me in the gym the other day. You're like, I've been working out for quite a while. He's like, I'm in really good shape, but all aerobic stuff kind of crushes me. I'm always at the same level, irregardless. And that's when we have to explore, right? Say you have a normal-ish. Say you get to 40 on your Bolt score, and it's still a problem. You have to explore other stuff, right? Do you have true asthma? But I would almost venture to say it would be really hard to get to a Bolt score of 40 if you did have asthma. Does that make sense? Because that's literally a gaseous exchange problem. Like that's in the bronchioles and the arterioles, right? They don't like communicate as well. So you have you undergo vasospasm.
Is anxiety a breathing problem?
I mean, this is a good chicken, I find myself saying this more and more on everything. It's chicken or egg, right? So let's say I'm a kid and I've had a major trauma. What we know is that you're going to have basically altered, muscular, this goes way down the rabbit hole, muscular tone, altered movement around that trauma, right? So this is where we get something that goes way off in the deep end called conversion disorder. So conversion disorder is literally where I associate something with pain, anxiety, nausea. So when I was at the Olympic Training Center, there was a girl that we were talking about that played volleyball. If she went into the volleyball gym, because her parents were dogging her, she literally had searing pain down her right leg. Her parents thought she was just making it up. And it came to the point where they did nerve conduction studies. She was actually having physiologic responses and never had trauma. That's a conversion disorder. You created a flipped scenario of physiology, right? You created pain without having something done to you. But think about it like this. We're all on conversion disorder. Think about chronic pain. And that's why I'm saying anxiety. So chronic pain, if you've, how many people come into me and they're like, oh, nothing happened. I don't know, my knee just started hurting. Oh, what do we used to call it? Overuse injuries. Do you know how freaking tough humans are? Extremely, they did a study on ultra runners that showed if you run, it was a specific pace over a specific distance, that you regenerated your meniscus in your knee just as fast as you tore it down. Crazy stuff. And then we think, oh, I'm just running. And granted, mechanics play a role, right? You run with poor mechanics, you may tear something up. You squat with poor mechanics, you may tear something up. But I think on a bigger level, this total disconnect between how we breathe, and then it goes all the way out, right? How we eat, all these things. So it's your anxiety may have been caused by an issue, just like all chronic low back pain is usually caused by an initial injury, a real injury, right? You try to pick up something heavy, but why do you have back pain 10 years later? Because your brain wants you to have back pain because it doesn't want you to pick something like that up again. And if we never readdress this issue, how do I pick this up without getting hurt? That's what all we do in here. Is literally recondition you and your brain to realize that this is not something to fear. That's what anxiety is.
What is it like post-traumatic stress is that way too? You could have a thought and have a whole...
And that's the level.
Probably fires for no reason.
Well, you want to, so in the Oxygen Advantage in the book of Peter McCallum, so athletes, this was Olympic athletes and extreme athletes, so snowboarders, skaters, the amygdala actually shrank after doing this for 6 months when they did fMRI. And granted, areas of your brain change all the time, right? You could have a bigger hypothalamus if you're more emotional, all these things, right? If you are blind, you're going to have a smaller occipital lobe, bigger temporal lobe, because you got to be able to hear better, right? This is just things that do change. It doesn't change in forms of you got bigger. It's white matter versus gray matter. White matter is myelinated tissue, right? Because you've laid down pathways, and myelin is just fat that wraps nerves. And when you use them more, right, you're going to lay down and kind of solidify it. If you don't, gray matter. And that is really neuroplasticity, right? Yeah. I know we're going way off breathing, but I mean, anxiety, yeah, it's a snowball, so I can't say because it's probably spurred by something, but we also see a lot of people that have, I mean, I saw the occurrence rate in the Olympic athletes of anxiety is through the roof.
Really?
And it could be the pressurized situation, but you also got to think why are people having more anxiety with no, what do they say all the time? I don't know. I don't think I'm really,
Technology, I think.
Well, I mean,
Increased
we're in a world that is very
Fact.
foreign to a human.
Just need to move to an island and sleep on the dirt.
But that's what I'm saying, that we are de-evolving as humans. I know that sounds really strange, and I'm not trying to get weird on you, but we are. What we're getting better at is this stuff. What we got to realize, you got to do other stuff. You just got to offset it. That's what eating right is, and sleeping better, and breathing better, and working out is. It's offsetting the stuff that we have to get better at.
Just balance in everything that we do.
And if you don't, you will get so good at this that you suck at being a human. That's what chronic pain is. That's what anxiety is.
If you get good at this, what?
Working in this world.
Yeah.
And I'm not just saying this world. You could be a high-powered lawyer that never touches his phone and his assistant does all of this work for him, and you could have all the same problems. But what are you doing? You're being a lawyer, not being a human. That kind of makes sense? Okay. So the breath hold stuff. Very easy, right? And I say 4 sets because that's going to take you into about usually 2 minutes worth of breath hold time, right? I'm not counting the recovery. Because usually it's going to be about 30 seconds if we're doing walking or something like that. We know we need at least 2 minutes, right? Because this is different than the breathe light, breathe right. We're breathing during that. If I'm breath holding, CO2 is getting spiked. 2 minutes is going to be the minimum amount of time we need to make that physiologic change, go into a more buffer state, and also start to increase tolerance. You can do more. This is the bare minimum. Okay, you do 2 sets. Maybe you're wasting time. I'd love for you to still do it, but we want to shoot for 4 at least. I think if you're doing 40, it's probably too much. And it'd have to be in with everything. I program this stuff in my warm-ups. As you get more advanced, I didn't cover this tonight because this is the first time you guys are hearing this. You will do this in workouts, right? I was in Iron Tribe the other day, and at the end, we had rowing at the end. I was doing breath holds the whole time. Right, so I go 50 meters breath hold, and then you try to recover. The recovery is the important part of this. Right? I could have done that, and in between, I'm like, right? And now I might as well just do a regular workout. Like I'm not doing breath hold, because I'm just feeding the opposite. Right? It's like I went up on a whiteboard, drew a pretty picture, and I just erase it, and I keep doing it, and I think I'm getting better. Okay, but eventually you do breath hold training during workouts. Probably more so. We're probably at a really good CO2 tolerance by then. Right? If you can run 200 meters at a decent, just a really easy pace and hold your breath, you're probably doing really well. What are you overriding at that point? Big guy. And for me, if I'm competitive, that's what I want an edge, right? I want to know twofold. I can maintain form, I can keep going, but that if I don't need air, I can push, right? If I ran that at a 720, I could probably do a 645 with breathing. But that's empowering, but it's also you are literally messing with your brain in a good way. And that's a lot of what CrossFit has done right. People call it going to the dark place, right? Going to the dark place means overriding stuff. I'm about to pass out, but I'm gonna keep going. Why do you think people like doing that? It's challenging. But I talk about this with a lot of athletes out in Colorado. That's what their workouts at that level. 90% of their workouts are super easy. What we would think is easy, believe it or not. 10%, crush them. It has nothing to do with the body and the crush workouts. It's all this. Does that make sense? If they crush them 3 days, 4 days out of the week like we all do, right? We all go crush ourselves. I'm gonna go run as hard as I can for 10 miles. I'm gonna go CrossFit my butt off. You will break down. They are smart and they know they gotta continually build, so it's easier to average what we would think is easy. The 10% is the crush of the mind, so they can override people. Right? If I'm a wrestler, that I know I got the edge over you because I'm willing to go there. I don't care how fatigued I am, I'm going to do it. And breathing's a big part of that. So does that make sense on the breath hold? Super easy, right? These are so easy, there's no reason not to incorporate them in your everyday life. But huge payoffs. I feel and I'm not just saying you guys are already here, you already paid for this. I'm not selling you anything else, right? I've been doing this for about a month and a half, I mean, it's been like a huge difference. And I feel like I was in pretty damn good shape before. But a huge difference because when I was a baby, I was on a sleep monitor for 1.5 years. I had sleep apnea horribly. So I think I've always had altered breathing, and then I broke my nose a couple times, and like, I was a terrible mouth breather. My sister used to slap me in the face and I could ground my teeth so bad. Like, I know I've had issues my whole life, but until I knew a lot about breathing too, I'm always learning. The more I've learned about the details of it, not just the broad strokes, the more I realize, man, the little stuff you do makes a big difference. Right? Just like diet. Right? You don't have to make vast changes to have huge, benefits or payoffs. So game plan. Nasal breathing, AED. What's that mean?
All day, every day.
All day, every day. Yeah. All the time, man. As much as you can, right? If you're exercising, you're gonna get into regular old.
You know what that's called? That's the practice of mindfulness that you do on the cushion. This is daily mindfulness. Oh,
That's my last goal.
oh damn. What do I win though?
We're getting always. Like I said, you will get into secondary respiration. That is a human thing. We need that. Go exercise, go run, go push yourself. If I do a track workout, I'm not worried about this except in my warm-up. Then I'm done with it. Does that make sense? You pick and choose. You're not deadlifting every day. You're not running, 20 miles every day. You're not doing 400 repeats every day. You gotta mix it up. Same thing here. Crucial during sleep. I'm not gonna tell you to take your mouth shut. What I've been finding myself doing is I still wake up. Like I was that kid, woke up with super dry mouth, right? I've had to pay attention as of late, if I wake up in the middle of the night, close my mouth, go right back to it. It's been enough for me to make a big difference, but I'm telling you right now, she can attest, I've had breathing issues on the side since I broke my nose, and that stuff has gone by the wayside, right? I had ear clearing issues when I tried to scuba dive and all that stuff, and all of that was tied to this thing, but a lot of that has gone by the wayside just by getting 8 hours of nasal breathing rather than just now. And I remember my uncle when I was 12 being like, "You trying to catch flies?" I know I was a mouth breather too. I was walking around like this. I was guilty of it. Diaphragmatic breathing, AED. And that one is pretty much all the time. Air hunger during some exercise bouts, right? Challenge yourself. In the beginning of a workout, maybe that's what you do, and as a beginner, you're I'm done. Just regular workout now. Regular cycling. First 5 miles on my bike, I'm gonna really try as little as I can, and then when I feel like it's getting out of control, okay, just let go. Go for it. Go have fun. Breath holds during walking exercise. Beginning, maybe it's gotta be a rest. Literally, if you do a normal inhale, normal exhale, and you make it this far, do you think you should be walking and doing this yet? Probably not. Probably gotta do it at rest and work on static breath holds until you can probably 20, 30 seconds sitting in your chair. Now you can get up and you probably make it 10 paces. Most kids, they looked at 8-year-olds doing this, can make it 100 paces.
So explain the breath hold. I'm a little bit foggy with the breath hold and when you
The mechanics?
doing something in.
So let's just say I'm walking my dog. So all I'm doing is I'm taking an inhale, taking an exhale, and I'm holding my breath.
Through the nose.
Yep. I'm just holding my breath on the exhale as long as I can. But then my recovery is 3 to 4 breaths minimum. It's not 10 breaths.
It's
right?
holding your breath though.
Yeah. And then 3 to 4 breaths for recovery. If it takes you 10 breaths or if it takes you mouth breathing to recover from the breath hold, you're not ready to hold your breath that long. Right? So you may be I did really good. And then you're not there yet.
When I was doing an exercise like a leg press, when I used to really do it stripping off plates or doing stuff like that, I used to hold my breath a lot. That's not good. Is that good?
So we always say in here, and if you think about yoga practice, so if you go into a squat, right, and you find yourself doing this, right, your brain is literally trying to say, you suck at this. You should bail, right? It's waving a red flag. And how's it doing that? It's cutting off oxygen, right? It's stopping you from breathing. So what's yoga done? Get into a pretty challenging pose, and then what do they say? Breathe.
Right.
So literally, you're trying to just depress the system, get out of sympathetic, which would be a breath hold or too much breathing, right? What would you do if you got hit in the face with cold water? Hopefully hold your breath. You're going to drown, right? So that's also a sympathetic response of a breath hold, right? Noxious stimuli, you could either, if you're scared, or if you're scared, So we need to override that, and yeah, so it's X, does that make sense? Okay.
Just three or four breaths in between,
Yeah,
like, and then they're not supposed to be big, but they're.
no, those can be fine. I mean, you're recovering, we just want them through your nose.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Those can be,
So they're not like air hunger.
yeah, we don't want to divert to. Okay. Okay, and I got it. Right, it's got to be through your nose, but those can be as big as you want. Or recover through your
Think
nose.
about holding your breath for a while and then,
But the reason you're doing, and this is also why it's on an exhale.
yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because you will have the urge to get rid of it, which you have to exhale through your mouth. You can't, you'd be blowing snot everywhere if you get it out of your nose that fast, and then it would be back to your mouth anyways. So that's another reason. The mechanical part of it is on that exhale for that reason. And then just like you said, the increased body awareness and mindfulness. Mindfulness practice has become huge across, pro sports, corporate mindfulness programs are all over the place. This is a big deal, and in every one of those, the punctum fixum, the main thing is breathing. Right, so it's a big deal. So if like everybody's doing it, I mean,
One of the best books, and I know you probably know of it, is by John Kabat-Zinn, Full
Mhm.
Catastrophe Living. They have a new version of
yeah,
it. It's really good.
and think of
Met John.
yeah. So even think of I'm blanking on his name. What's the big guy? Banana Hands. The motivational speaker.
Oh, yeah.
Tony Robbins. So
Shallow hell.
yeah. So his thing is he takes air hunger breaths. Nothing like what we're doing. But he does 30 of these and he jumps into a really fancy cold plunge. But he is literally doing, all he's doing is self-regulating his autonomic nervous system. Do I think he's doing exactly the opposite of what he thinks he's doing? Probably, but maybe not. He's jumping in a cold pool. What's he going to get? A sympathetic response. What did he just do? Wake up. Right? So maybe he just knows intrinsically he likes the sympathetic rush. Does that make sense? What I'm saying is, I think we're already there enough. Like, let's go the other way. Right? And that's just my opinion. But like, you see a lot of people doing breathing stuff now. I don't know that a lot of people are backing it up with science. Right? Larry Hamilton is one of my idols. I think the dude is like superhuman. He does a lot of this cold water immersion breathing training. I think a lot of it is completely wrong. I want to go to one of his like $5,000, pay to be my friend, hang out with me, just to see what they do and see how big of a freak he is. Like, I would tell him things wrong. Right? Because he would be open to it. Like, these are people that are pushing the envelope of like the highest level of human performance. And if they're gonna, change something, like, or they're willing to change something, but I think they're doing it wrong. And if we could give him an edge to think about who can hold his breath underwater, like that's why he does it. He goes, if I'm gonna get crushed by a wave, I want to make sure I can go back and see my kids. So if I had told him, hey, I think you could get another 30 seconds out of doing like, does that make sense? Like, so I don't think what I'm telling you is like blasé, even though it seems simple. Right? This is powerful stuff. It's just not mainstream, because mainstream is blow into a spirometer, take your Singulair, take your rescue inhaler, and see you later.
I stopped using mine. That's what they said I had. And
Exercise induced?
And that was a lot of the problem. Once I stopped using it, I was doing better without it.
And that's
like the mental thing is like, I'm taking something, I should be able to breathe better.
And it probably took a little while because you were used to like getting that.
Right.
I mean, it's also, the other thing that's in albuterol is part basically a bronchodilator. It's also epinephrine. Right? So you get a big sympathetic rush. Right? So when you do that, like you get a little whoo, right? The reason is, what do? You get temporary vasodilation core, but you actually get vasoconstriction out here, so you shunt blood, right? If I had a lion chasing me, I do not want it to bite my hand off and I bleed out. So we shunt blood into the core, right? But then you flip it around and you go right back to where you were, if not worse. You get a refractory period too. So I know I said this stuff's all basic, but this is a really smart dude. I don't know if you're a football fan. This is what he started every season of a pro football season with. These are people that have been playing football their whole lives, the best of the best. And he told them, gentlemen, this is a football, because he started with the basics. The best athletes in the world are the best at the basics, best at fundamentals. This stuff to me is the fundamentals of breathing. None of us know about it, not a lot of us do it, now that you know, you gotta do, right? But I almost, as I was putting this together, I was like, I feel back as this seems too easy, right? But it only seems too easy because that's where you gotta start. But like the only ceiling to this stuff is just challenging yourself in different ways with it. There's no more drills. It doesn't get any fancier. I don't like hook you up to a scuba mask and we like dip you upside down in the water and then we have you do nasal breathe. Like this is it, right? Like how far can you go with it? Like could I challenge myself to go run 5 miles on the breathing through my nose? Sure, did it the other day. Do I know if that's beneficial or not yet? I don't know. Do I think it? Probably more up here, right? My CO2 tolerance is probably like, you're gonna hit a max, right? If this goes, our little pulse oximeter, if that goes below 80%, we're doing damage, right? You still have to obey the principles of human physiology. You can't say, like, you can't American it. It's good, do more. You reach a ceiling, you do as good as you can, we're all different. We're all gonna have different ceilings, okay? I really appreciate you guys listening, and we're a little